Ezekiel saw something very similar as well. Ezekiel chapter 1 and verse 26, "And above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, and as the appearance of a sapphire stone, and upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. And I saw it the color of amber, and as the appearance of fire round about within it. From the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward, I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and it had brightness round about. And as the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord, and when I saw it, I fell upon my face." He is holy. God is holy. 1 Timothy 6:16 tells us that He dwells in light which no man can approach. And if God were to approach us as He approached these men of old, we would fall immediately on our faces and cry out, "Holy, holy, holy." Because that's what He is. And we would be like Isaiah and saying, "Woe is me, for I am undone." Because when you come into the presence and you understand how holy He is, how great, powerful, and amazing that He is, you begin to feel your own insignificance. And a prideful heart. Nobody's going to be strutting through in front of the holy throne of God. Nobody will be. Because He is holy. The reason for this, you may wonder, why am I going through this? What does this have to do with that parable? Well, the reason for this is because people who are arrogant, like the Pharisee in this parable, people who are boastful and proud, have a very base view of God. They have a very diminished view of Him. But on top of that, they have a very elevated view of themselves. Now we come to the question, who are we? Because remember, there's two perspectives. Who is God? God is holy. God is righteous. God is omnipotent. God is omnipresent. God is all these things. But who is man? And the psalmist said it very well. He says, "Who is man that thou art mindful of it? What is man that thou art mindful of him?" Many hold to the belief that Jesus died on the cross because we were worth saving. I tell you, that's a grave error. There was nothing in us that was worth saving. Paul said it this way. He says, "In me dwells no good thing. That is, in my flesh dwells no good thing." We were not worth saving. There was nothing within us that made us desirable to God. Man continually disposes himself to rebel against God. Man, by his very nature, is an enemy of God. If God were to make a law today of the highest absurdity, we would break that law. It wouldn't matter if it was, "Don't go in that closet right there," we would break it. Because we are lawbreakers. We are sinners. And that is our natural inclination. I wonder what's in there. You see, that is the very natural inclination, our very sinful nature that drives us to disobey God. And Isaiah 64 tells us that even the very righteousness, I know y'all have heard me say this before, that the very righteousness that we would render to God is as filthy rags. So the best that we can give God is a soiled rag. You know why that is? I'm going to give you an illustration that will help you remember this from here on. If you were to go out and play in the mud, and then you were to come into your mom's house, it doesn't matter how obedient you are to your mother, everything you touch becomes soiled. You see what I'm getting at? And is it not the same way with us and God? It doesn't matter how good you are now, but because you have wallowed in your sin, everything you touch is now soiled. Everything you touch is now unclean before God. The point of the matter is this, that there is none righteous. There's none good. No, not one. That is what Jesus is kind of driving home here. He's showing you that this Pharisee, this very elevated religious man is not good. There's none good. No, not one. And Paul, in the book of Romans, he took the first 3 chapters of the book of Romans. If you've never read it, I encourage you to read it, because I'm only going to give you a little verse insert of how man stands condemned before the holy, righteous God of all the earth. In Romans 1, he shows how that the heathen stands condemned because he refuses to walk in the light of his conscience, and he refuses the testimony of nature that the things that are made were made without hands. They were made by the invisible things. And they show the Godhead. And he refuses the testimony of nature. He refuses his own conscience that God has given every man to walk in the light of it. And then Romans 2 comes along and he shows us that the moral man, he stands condemned because he judges men because they are immoral. And because he judges them, he is condemned himself because he practices the same things. And we see also that the religious man, the Jewish people, were condemned because they knew the laws, they knew the commandments, they knew about God, but they failed to teach themselves. You that teach, do not steal, do you steal? You that teach, do not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You that teach, don't worship idols, do you commit sacrilege? You see how man stands condemned. And that's the whole premise of it. And he builds it up. That's just to say this one phrase, there's none good. No, not even one. And he says later on in verse 19, for whatsoever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before God. And this is man standing guilty before God. And so this is what I want us to see in this parable. We see 2 perspectives. One who sees who God is and sees him for the sinful man that he is. And then you have the other one who has distorted his view of God and has abased him. And he has exalted himself, thinking that he is a good man, a righteous man. And because of that, when people exalt themselves, they have a tendency of looking down at others and despising others. And that's what he wanted to point out in this passage. But let's just say right now, okay, even if you had the right perspective right now of God and of yourself, all you would do would just show the great gulf that is fixed between us. All you would do is just see how far apart man is truly from God. It's the equivalent, and I wish I had this as an illustration that you might see it, but it's the equivalent of 2 magnets pointing at north at each other. They repel each other, don't they? If you ever try to put 2 magnets pointing north toward each other, they repel each other. Why? Because God resists. He stiff-arms the proud. But you think about it this way, man stiffs and represses the truth of Christ. Because they don't want to know God. They don't want to live up to His standards. They would rather be in their sin, and they stiff-arm God and say, God, I don't want it. I'd rather have my sin. And that's what we do. And that's why one repels and the other one repels. And we just see the incompatibility of man and God. God gives a commandment, man breaks the commandment. God says, I am holy, be holy, and we are just wallowing in the filth of our own sin. Do you see the incompatibility? But I want us to also notice that, yes, our magnet, yes, it's pointed north towards God, repelling and pushing against God. But at the same time, we've got our other side drawn to the things of the world, and we long and we desire the things of this world. Our magnet has been turned to this world. Our flesh cries out for sexual immorality. We daydream of sexual rendezvous. We yearn to possess and to acquire things at whatever means, lie, steal. We desire to act upon our hatred and murder. The only thing that restrains us is the ordinances of government and of man. We want nothing more than to snub our nose at authority, especially God's.